Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahil aliyyil azim. Allahu akbar, Allahu akbar, Allahu akbar, Allahu akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له جل. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له جل جلاله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله صلوات الله عليه وآله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير العمل، حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله، لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم اجعل قلبي بارا وعملي سارا وعيشي كارا ورزقي دارا والعادي برارا واجعل عند قبر النبي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم مستقرا وقرارا برحمتك يا رب. صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى. نحمده ونستعينه ونثني عليه ونؤمن به، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف بريته ومبلغ رسالاته العبد المؤيد الرسول المسدد المحمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. عباد الله، أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. We begin this first Friday khutbah to remind all of you and myself to maintain the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inshallah, in the first khutbah, we'll continue with our discussion on the work of 40 ahadith. And in the second khutbah, inshallah, we will touch on some of the recent events that have taken place. This narration that the author of 40 Ahadith started this chapter with was from the Holy Prophet. He was narrating in the wasiyah that he had for the first Imam. And قال يا Ali, he said, O Ali, أوصيك في نفسك بخصال فاحفظها عني. Remember these characteristics from me. The first of those was الصدق ولا تخرجن من فيك كذبة أبدا. The trustworthiness that people have, your truthfulness that you have. Don't allow a lie to ever leave your mouth. وَالثَّانِيَةُ الْوَرَعُ. And the second was that fear and that abstinence and that distance that someone keeps from sin. And we touched on this briefly. وَلَا تَجْتَرِعْ عَلَى خِيَانَةٍ أَبَدًا. And never become the person who betrays the trust of others. So we were discussing the topic of al-wara', and we said that, of course, in our communities, the general understanding when it comes to righteousness, the general understanding when it comes to elevating my spiritual status is that I have to get busy. I have to do many good deeds. Month of Muharram comes around, many of us are very busy. Month of Safar comes around, we are very busy. Month of Ramadan comes around, we are very busy. The reason why you and I, we don't grow spiritually in these months, and sometimes we find ourselves after the month of Ramadan, after the month of Muharram and Safar, in the same situation we were before, is because this activity is not coupled with what hadith refers to as al-wara'. This is one of those terminologies, you don't find it in the Quran too often, you find it a lot in hadith. Quran doesn't use the terminology wara' too much. Typically, it refers to the same concept with the idea of taqwa. When we say taqwa, this is what it means. It means I fear disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I build a natural dislike to sinning. Yeah, so the Quran refers to this as taqwa. In hadith, sometimes it's referred to as taqwa, sometimes as al-wara'. So the Ahl Bayt taught us that the believer who engages in many good deeds, but at the same time engages in sin, sin is part and parcel of his life, he's not going anywhere. He's not truly growing. This is a reality, brothers and sisters. It's a difficult pill to swallow. But this is something we have to understand. Shaitan would love to see me busy with a lot of different good deeds. As long as I don't make a decision to drop those sins, as long as I don't make an active decision to purify my life from those areas where I'm disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's okay with this. He doesn't have a problem with this. In the words of one great scholar, he said, Shaitan is very much okay with you coming and crying in the majlis of the third Imam, as long as when you leave you don't change anything. He's okay with this. In fact, there's millions who fall under this category. Yes? Well, this is a big action, a big act of worship. Showing your love and affection for the third Imam in our school of thought. Obviously, the narrations are too many to even count on this topic, yes? But Shaitan is okay with this. So I cannot trick myself. I cannot sugarcoat things when it comes to myself. The first Imam, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he has a beautiful line. He has many ahadith in this theme, but this is the one that stands out for me personally. He says, when you are holding yourself accountable, don't sugarcoat things. Yes? Don't compromise. Hold yourself accountable the way you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to hold you accountable on the Day of Judgment. And he uses a very beautiful analogy. His analogy is this. He says, you have to hold yourself accountable the way muhasabatu sharik sharikahu. The way a business partner holds his own business partner accountable. If they got $1,000 or $2,000 or $100,000 in profit, business partners don't sit there and say, oh, it's not a big deal, we're doing well. No, they say, let's put down the books. Let's figure out exactly who's getting what. They say, no, this one is mine, this one is yours. We figure out all the details. The first Imam said, this is how you hold yourself accountable. Now, yes, I fall short a lot, but as long as I hold myself accountable in this way, I know where my base is, I know where to go back to. But the one who sugarcoats it, inshallah, everything is fine. No, this is not part of our culture. Inshallah, the akhirah is fine. Inshallah, we have faith in our hearts. This is not part of our culture. Now, of course, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so great, at the end of the day, He'll find a way, yes, for us to not lose too much in this life, to not have too much khusran in this life. But the Ahlul Bayt didn't teach us this. The Ahlul Bayt taught us, you hold yourself accountable seriously. The same way a business partner holds another person accountable. So, when I look at my deeds, I cannot look at just how busy I am. Oh, I did this lecture. I'm using myself as an example. I did this lecture. Then I came and I attended Jumu'ah. Then I helped this person. Then I helped that person. Okay. But is there sin in your life? Are there things that's ruining your good deeds? You know, some sins, the narrations say, sometimes one sin has the power to remove multiple good deeds. Now, in the Quran and Hadith, what we read is, you know, one good deed counts as 10 and a bad deed counts as 1 and so on and so forth. This is there in terms of the accounting. But it seems on a spiritual level, sometimes one sin can remove the value and the impact of many good deeds. That's why the narration says, for example, if this person has hasad, it sets fire to his faith. If he accuses another believer of something that he hasn't done, his faith starts to dissolve the way salt dissolves in water. These types of terminology we have in narrations, what does it mean? It means sometimes one sin that I'm doing on a spiritual level can remove the value of many of my good deeds. So al-wara' is very important. Okay, this is why the Ahlul Bayt went back to this idea so often. This narration is from the sixth Imam, Al-Imam As-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He says, Yazid ibn Khalifa, companion of the sixth Imam, wa'adana Abu Abdillahi alayhi salam. He was giving us advice. فَأَمَرَ وَزَهَّدَ. He was telling us to do this and do that. ثُمَّ قال, and then he said, عَلَيْكُمْ بِالْوَرَعِ. He said, fear sins, remove sins from your lifestyle. فَإِنَّهُ لَا يُنَالُ مَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ إِلَّا بِالْوَرَعِ. Because you're not going to get anywhere unless you have wara'. It's not about being busy. It's about removing sin from my life. In another narration, we find a very similar terminology. This is also from our sixth Imam, Al-Imam As-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. He says, كُنْتُ عِنْدَ أَبِي عَبْدِ اللَّهِ. I was with the sixth Imam. فَدَخَلَ عِيسَى بْنُ عَبْدِ اللَّهِ الْقُمِّي. Yes, someone from the Qummi family entered and was with him. فَرَحَّبَ بِهِ وَقَرَّبَ مِنْ مَجْلِسِهِ. So when that person entered, he welcomed him and had him sit very close to him. Okay. ثُمَّ قَالَ يَا عِيسَى بْنَ عَبْدِ اللَّهِ. He said, "O Isa, know this. لَيْسَ مِنَّا وَلَا كَرَامَةً." This person is not from us. It's not associated with us. وَلَا كَرَامَةً. He doesn't have much honor in the eyes of God. Who? مَنْ كَانَ فِي مِصْرٍ فِيهِ مِئَةُ أَلْفٍ أَوْ يَزِيدُونَ. A person who lives in a city. There's 100,000 people in that city. وَكَانَ فِي ذَلِكَ الْمِصْرِ أَحَدٌ أَوْرَعَ مِنْهِ. And in that city there are those who fear sin more than him. He's not minna. He's not practicing what we taught. It's a really high standard. They said if you're a follower of the Ahlul Bayt, you have to have the most wara'. Now, in our communities, this is a question we all know the answer to. Yes, typically in our communities, is it such that if someone is Shi'i, they say, oh, this is the one, he fears sin the most? Is that how they identify followers of Ahlul Bayt? I don't think that's how followers of Ahlul Bayt are identified, yes? Because we have let down the message of the Prophet and his family. So, the author of 40 Hadith continues. He says, listen, when the human being has wrong deeds, he has sin that is having an impact on his soul, and this is the little bit more of the irfani / philosophical aspect of the discussion. He says, when the human being engages in sin, those good deeds that he does, they don't have an opportunity to take a form and shape on his soul. So when he does those good deeds, they don't really have a spiritual impact on his soul. And he gives a very beautiful analogy. Yes, he says it's like, for example, an artist. If an artist wants to do its art, wants to bring something beautiful and have that beautiful thing take form and take shape, the canvas has to be pure, has to be clean. If someone came in before he started his art, yes, and polluted the canvas, Now, if this artist comes and tries to do his or her art, it's never going to take form. The good deeds that we read in Quran and Hadith, we believe they have a spiritual reality. When I commit those good deeds, when I do those good deeds, that spiritual reality and my soul becomes one. That spiritual reality takes form and shape in my soul. This is why you and I change every moment. We're not the same human being. If I do something good, my soul takes on a different form, literally. This is not a metaphor. Literally, my soul takes on a different form. But if I have sins, then this good deed, it cannot even actualize in my soul. Yes? Therefore, the impact of it is very minimal. Okay. Then he continues, and these are lines I'm reading from himself because this is a big claim. So you have to read it directly from the words of the author because I can't make this claim. But he says this. He says, now if shaitan comes to you and says, listen, this wara is too difficult, it's not doable. Yes, these are standards that are good to hear about, but at the end of the day, we're never going to get there. He said, ثُمَّ إِنَّ الْإِبْتِعَادَ عَنِ الْمُحَرَّمَاتِ الْإِلَهِيَّةِ لَا يَسْتَدْعِي جُهْدًا جَبَّارًا. Staying away from all sins does not require unbelievable efforts. Now, we're used to the opposite. We're used to what? If you want to stay away from sin, unbelievably difficult. This is partially what shaitan has taught us. Now, he doesn't say it's not difficult. The point he's trying to make is at the end of the day, you can't lower your standard. Say, yeah, the one who lives his life for 6 months, and in this 6 months, he is so aware he doesn't commit sins in any of these 6 months. This is unbelievably difficult. Says, no. لا يستطيع جهدا جبارا. It's not that difficult as much as shaitan wants to make it look like to you. Because when shaitan puts something out of your standard, then you don't worry about it anymore. You say, this is something none of us can ever achieve. He says, no, لا يستطيع جهدا جبارا. بل الإنسان مع قليل من الترويض النفسي والعمل يستطيع أن يترك جميع المحرمات. If he puts himself through some training, he will be able to set aside all sins. This is counterintuitive for us. Because typically the idea is, no, you can't do that. You're always going to fall short. No, that's where we start. That's not the standard that we set. You know, these words that you read from the author, you know what it's like? It's like when someone starts out as an amateur in a particular field, and he looks at the challenges in front of him. He says, I don't think I will ever be able to get there. But then he has a very experienced coach beside him, very experienced mentor beside him. He holds his hand and says, trust me, there will come a day you will be able to achieve all of this. There will come a time you will be able to achieve. Don't let it become this unreachable standard. No, this is reachable. It's difficult, but reachable. He says, if you put in that effort, yes, شَرِيطَةَ إِرَادَتِهِ أَن يَكُونَ فَرْدًا مِنْ أَهْلِ السَّعَادَةِ وَالنَّجَاةِ. The only thing is he has to make a condition to himself that he wants to be determined to be from the people of Sa'ada and Najat, from the people of salvation, inshallah. Yes? He adds a little bit more, but I will end with this point, brothers and sisters. It's one thing to be forgiving towards ourselves because we fall short. It's one thing to be forgiving. It's another thing, and the second one is the work of shaitan, to lower our standards. These two are different. Being forgiving towards myself when I have a shortcoming, knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful, getting back on track quickly, that's one thing. It's another thing to say, okay, this is the new norm. The new norm is I commit sins and then I do tawbah. No. See, the author is saying you're not supposed to allow that to become your new norm. Yes? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects us to understand and acknowledge His mercy and at the same time have wara'. Part of that wara' is I never make sin my new reality. I never sit there and say, yes, this is my life. I commit haram and then I repent again. No, I don't want that to be my reality. I want to go above and beyond this standard. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us such that we are never at a point where we normalize committing sins, inshallah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم صل على بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، أثني عليه حامدا وأذكره مسبحا، ثم أصلي وأسلم على نجيبه وجليله وحافظ سره الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرضين بأبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. اللهم صل وسلم على علي أمير المؤمنين وفاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، وعلى سبطي نبي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة، وعلى علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي، حججك على عبادك وأمنائك في أرضك. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات. عباد الله أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. We remind ourselves to maintain the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll continue with this verse in Surah Qaf, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clarifies for us that there are two groups of people. There are those who want to head towards a heaven in which the Quran says, لَهُمْ مَا يَشَاءُونَ فِيهَا. Whatever they like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prepared for them, وَلَدَيْنَا مَزِيد. And in fact, more than what they can possibly imagine. And then the Quran says there are also those, وَكَمْ أَهْلَكْنَا قَبْلَهُمْ مِنْ قَرْنٍ, those who continue to disobey us until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's punishment is sent down upon them. فَنَقَّبُوا فِي الْبِلَادِ هَلْ مِن مَحِيصٍ. They were powerful. نَقَّبُوا فِي الْبِلَادِ means they made their ways through the valleys. In other words, they had the power to build civilizations, they had the power to build cities, towns, all of this kind of stuff, yes? But the Quran says when our punishment came, هَلْ مِن مَحِيصٍ. Was there anybody to save them from this punishment? إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَلذِّكْرَى لِمَنْ كَانَ لَهُ قَلْبٌ أَوْ أَلْقَى السَّمْعَ وَهُوَ شَهِيدٌ. Certainly in this is a reminder for everyone who thinks he has a qalb, he is contemplating, أو أَلْقَى السَّمْعَ وَهُوَ شَهِيدٌ, or he is paying attention carefully. Either he comes up with it himself, he can contemplate it himself, or he is listening carefully to those who admonish him. The Quran adds one more line, and here I will pause inshallah. وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا فِي سِتَّةِ أَيَّامٍ. We have created the heavens and the earth and everything in between it in 6 periods of time. وَمَا مَسَّنَا مِن لُغُوبٍ. And doing all of this, none of it created any fatigue for us. None of it was heavy for us. So of course the Quran is using this argument to explain that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have created everything like this and it did not bring him any fatigue, certainly he can bring everyone back. Certainly there is a ma'ad. Certainly he is capable to bring people back from the dead and hold them accountable. The verses of the Quran continue, and it begins to threaten the disbelievers that today you have power, you do as you wish. The Quran is going to tell the Prophet in the future verses, فَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا يَقُولُونَ. Be patient with what they say. Be patient with what they do. Their time will come. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is more powerful than all of them. Yes. And today, brothers and sisters, you find there are people in the world that we are all aware of, they do the same thing. They assume there's no one more powerful than them. And this is the intoxication that comes with power. You know, they say this person is mad with power. Yes? This is what you see in these governments. Mad with power. So they kill. They feel like there's nobody to stop them. So they become intoxicated with their power. They become mad with their power. They feel invincible. And this is exactly what we see. So first they'll come, they will bomb a place like Gaza to smithereens, yes? And the rest of the world is looking at this and saying these are war crimes. But because these individuals, they're mad with power, believe it or not, they see this as a masterpiece. They see this as a huge achievement. They see this as our plan is carrying out. What they don't understand is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the verses of the Quran. Inna rabbaka labil mirsad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in what way we don't know. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, Inna rabbaka labil mirsad. He's waiting for the right time. How He will deal with them, in what way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. We don't know. But He said, I am waiting. Yes, mirsad is an ambush. He said, I am waiting for them. This is what this person doesn't understand. So the more he goes down this road, he thinks he's getting ahead. In reality, he's getting closer and closer to the mirsad of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's getting closer and closer to that point where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will pull the plug on him in whatever way He knows, in whatever way His wisdom dictates. So they assume the bigger the atrocities, the more successful. And the Quran teaches us the bigger the atrocities, the closer you are to failure. The people of Thamud, when Salih came to them, put the most amazing creature in front of them. Put the naqa of Salih, yes, the camel, yes, or the female camel as the Quran says. Put that in front of them. That was representing a miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes? Something very pure, something divine. And then they came to get rid of it. When they got rid of it, they assumed what? They were that much closer to defeating Salih. And in reality, they didn't know that they have just kick-started the process of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala getting rid of them. And in today's world and with the events that have happened in the past week, yes, they assume they've gotten rid of the biggest pieces of this puzzle. And yet they don't know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has now kick-started the process in His own way. We don't know. In His own way of leading their plots to failure. The bigger the atrocities, yes, the more pure the individuals that you quote-unquote get rid of, the closer you are to failure. This is, of course, we put our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I know that the events of this past week, have been very difficult for all of us, yes? We've broken down into tears, and every time we hear voices that we were accommodated to and used to, we break down into tears, and we should. Major, major losses. But at the end of the day, this is part of the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have to trust in His wisdom. It's not a coincidence that the Quran keeps bringing back the stories of Fir'aun. It's not a coincidence that the Quran keeps bringing back the story of people who thought they own everything. In fact, if you look in the Old Testament is one large story of ups and downs of the people of Bani Israel. Yes? And they will tell you that every time we disobeyed God, what happened to us? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in their own words, punished us. Yes? And when we obeyed God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God brought us might and power. This is how this world works. Yes, right now we are in the cycle where disobedience is taking place. Unbelievable disobedience. The more the disobedience, the more pure the souls that are taken from this world, the closer to the end of this plotting, the closer to the end of this corruption, to this killing, to this bombing. If you look at the data from the 2006 war that started in Lebanon, the amount of killings that happened in that 33 roughly day period was around 1,300, 1,400 individuals. Today, we are maybe a week, 10 days into this war, and you have 1,400 killed already. Just a couple nights ago, 21 individuals killed and wounded who are healthcare workers. Now reports are coming in that they are told that if we bomb a certain area, you don't have the right to send in civil defense forces, which are forces that come in by the government to take care of the rubble and save whoever is left and move them and transport them to hospitals and so on and so forth, yes? And of course, the world watches. The world watches all of this happening, yes? But as the Prophet used to do, we take our complaint to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We do our shikaya and shakwa to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He certainly hears us. There is a time, I always, whenever things are extremely difficult and as painful as they've been recently, There's a dua of the Prophet I always remember and that I always go back to. That is the dua that the Prophet did after nearly 13 years of preaching in Mecca. And it came to a point where now he had lost his relatives to support him. And now he was going to other tribes, asking them to come and support him. And they said, no, we won't support you. So he went to Ta'if. He had that famous trip to Ta'if. And even on that trip, not much came out of it. So the narrations and the Sunni sources have narrated this, and some Shi'i sources have narrated this dua as well, where the Prophet came and he sat in the shade of one of those gardens that was in that area. Yes? And he said, لَكَ الْعُتْبَى لَكَ الْعُتْبَى. Oh Allah, you get to decide what happens to me. So as long as you are happy with me, فَلَا أُبَالِي. The rest doesn't matter for me. As long as you are pleased with me. This is how difficult things are nowadays. Where we address Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we say, oh Allah, you're taking pure souls from us, but you decide. You're the one in charge. We're not in charge. You are the one who decides who stays, and you are the one who decides who has to go from this world. And of course, whatever we do, we will never experience the pain of one mother in Gaza. We'll never experience the pain of one mother in Lebanon. Never experienced the pain of one father in these areas. We've gone through tremendous difficulties. So we, of course, have to continue, brothers and sisters, to carry out our duties. At the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's response will come. When will it come? We don't know. This is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is a peaceful protest that's put together, inshallah, October 5th, tomorrow, I believe at 3 p.m. That will be downtown. And inshallah, all of us can take part in that, because especially with everything that's been happening, and now a full year since this genocide began. A full year since the bombing and the massacres and the war crimes. War crimes that if you and I wanted to make a list of it, we would struggle. You remember at the beginning of all of this, the hospital was bombed, yes? When the hospital was bombed, there's big debates. Who did this? And they would say, no, it's impossible for them to have done this. It's not possible, yes. Today, there's not even debates. Today, schools where families are displaced, they go and they take refuge, they're bombed. And it's just another Tuesday. Yes, it's just another day, it doesn't matter, yes. Hospitals attacked, schools attacked, refugee camps attacked, everything. It's difficult to make a list of the war crimes that have been taking place when it comes to the incidents of Gaza, and now, unfortunately, when it comes to the incidents of Lebanon. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give the people of Palestine and Lebanon patience. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless the Muslim nations. And as the last point I will mention is that this is all, brothers and sisters, lessons for us. There's not everything that we can say on public platforms. There's not everything I can come and spill out everything in the Jumu'ah khutbah. But these are conversations that you and I have to have with our children. They need to be raised understanding the persecution that Muslims go through around the world. Now, sometimes they're younger. They may not be able to see certain footage and so on and so on, of course, yes. But they have to know what's happening. Look at other minority faiths. When they are persecuted, look at how they teach their children. They didn't say, my child is just growing up, he's 10, 12, 15. He's a child right now. No. They teach them from a young age. If you don't put yourself in a position to be resourceful, to uplift your community, this is what other people will do to your community. They grow up with this in their mindset, and sometimes to an extreme, where they feel like the whole world is after them. Now that's an extreme, we don't want that. But our children, these are conversations we have to have in the house. Don't just assume, yes, my child is growing up and he understands. No. These are conversations you have to have with your children in the house. They have to understand the importance of certain figures. They have to understand the importance of certain characters. They have to understand what's happening in the world around them. You have to cultivate in them political awareness. Political awareness is part of the teachings of the Ahl Bayt. What they did with that awareness was different from time to time. But what the Ahl Bayt all had in common, political awareness. How the 6th Imam approached it, how the 5th Imam approached it, very different from each other compared to the 3rd Imam. compared to the 10th Imam, compared to the 11th Imam. Very different. But they all built this idea that you have to have political awareness. Our children are growing up in societies today where these issues are not brought up very often. No. When it's Lebanese healthcare workers, it doesn't even make the news. Now, if they were from a different country, a different ethnicity, it would be all over the news. We would not hear the end of it. But because they're in this part of the world, whatever the case might be, doesn't even come up. You and I have to take that step to make sure that our children understand what type of world they're living in. They cannot grow up naive. He cannot grow up just knowing his gaming system is the only thing that he knows in this world. We don't want this type of Muslim. We want a Muslim who's aware. We want a Muslim who understands his role. We want a Muslim who can play a role in society and his community for the well-being of his own community, his own society, and ultimately the world, inshallah. Otherwise, the corruption of these individuals who start wars, we will never be able to stand in their face. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst those who play our role. We have these conversations with our children. We raise our children with this mindset, with this understanding, so that long after you and I are gone, they will continue with this political awareness. And inshallah, they will be able to uplift their communities better than you and I did. Inshallah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. اللهم صل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. ما صلى أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. ما صلى وأن عليا حجة الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. يا محسن قد أتاك المسيء وقد أمرت المحسن أن يتجاوز عن المسيء. أنت المحسن وأنا المسيء، فبحق محمد وآل محمد صل على محمد وآل محمد وتجاوز عن قبيح ما تعلم مني. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين وآخرين منهم لما يلحقوا بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا بئس مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أنكم أولياء لله من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولا يتمنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائما قل ما عند الله خير من اللهو ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
الله
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. لا إله إلا الله العظيم الحليم. لا إله إلا الله رب العرش الكريم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والغنيمة من كل بر والسلامة من كل إثم. اللهم لا تدع لي ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا سقما إلا شفيته ولا عيبا إلا سترته ولا رزقا إلا بسطته ولا خوفا إلا آمنته ولا سوءا إلا صرفته ولا حاجة هي لك رضا ولي فيها صلاح إلا قضيتها يا أرحم الراحمين. آمين رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. There's no God except God, the all-supreme and the all-forbearing. There's no God except God, the Lord of the noble throne. All praise belongs to God, Lord of all the worlds. O God, I beseech you to grant me that which will call forth your mercy and make certain your forgiveness, and grant me a share of every virtue and safety from every sin. O God, do not leave any of my sins unforgiven, nor any grief unrelieved, nor any illness uncured, nor any defect unconcealed, nor any provision unenhanced, nor any fear unalleviated, nor any evil unrepelled, nor any need of which you approve and in which lies my welfare unfulfilled. O most merciful of the merciful, Ameen, O Lord of all the worlds. Salawat.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله وسلم عليه وأن عليا حجة الله صلى الله وسلم عليه حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله استغفر الله ربي وتوب الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته وارفع درجته بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام، وأسأله أن يتوب علي توبة عبد ذليل خاضع فقير بائس مسكين مستكين مستجير، لا يملك لنفسه نفعا ولا ضرا ولا موتا ولا حياة ولا نشورا. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من نفس لا تشبع، ومن قلب لا يخشع، ومن علم لا ينفع، ومن صلاة لا ترفع، ومن دعاء لا يسمع. اللهم إني أسألك اليسر بعد العسر، والفرج بعد الكرب، والرخاء بعد الشدة. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك، لا إله إلا أنت. أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. I beseech the forgiveness of God, besides whom there is no God, the living one, the all-sustainer, the all-beneficent, the all-merciful, the Lord of majesty and munificence. I beseech him to accept penitence of mine as a servant who is weak, humble, needy, destitute, indigent, and miserable, a fugitive seeking refuge who has neither any power to obtain any benefit for himself, nor to avoid any harm, nor any power over his own life, death, or resurrection. O God, I seek your protection from a carnal soul which is never satisfied, from a heart that is not humble, from a knowledge that brings no benefit, from prayers that are not taken up to the heaven, and from supplications that are not heard. O God, I beseech you to grant me ease after hardship, and relief after pain, and ease after distress. O God, whatever blessing we partake of comes from you. There is no God but you. I beseech your forgiveness and revert to you penitently. Salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين، السلام على 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين، السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على